past few years, I've tested a lot of great USA-made tools, and a viewer suggested we have a 4th of July special on comparing the top 10. The Malco calls their locking pliers the Eagle Grips, and it definitely seems to be a great description for their locking pliers. In the first test, I clamped the locking pliers onto a smooth portion of a grade 5 bolt. I then used a rounded nut extractor to fasten to the tension screw. The adjustment screws were tightened to 120 inch-pounds. Unfortunately, not all the brands could handle 120 inch-pounds of torque on the tension screw. The teeth on other locking pliers were just not very sharp and were just too soft to gain a good grip. Even other brands performed well, but they experienced a lot of wear and tear to the teeth. However, the Malco Eagle Grips just totally crushed the competition, reaching 1,053 inch-pounds of torque before losing grip, but not before shredding the bolt. The teeth in the Malco really held up well, experiencing a very small amount of wear. So Malco finished the first round of the competition over 300 inch-pounds of torque, more than the second place finisher. In the second round of competition, I tested the cutters on the locking pliers. Several of the brands aren't equipped with cutters and couldn't participate, but the Malco pliers were able to cut through a 16-penny nail, requiring 173 inch-pounds of squeezing force. While the Eagle Grips didn't finish in first, there's no visible damage to the cutters. The locking pliers then competed to see which brand offers the best front teeth gripping strength. I once again tightened the adjustment screw to 120 inch-pounds. Most of the brands did a great job, averaging just over 100 inch-pounds, which is actually pretty good when all things are considered. However, the Eagle Grips applied the death grip on the bolt and finally lost traction at 209 inch-pounds, or 25% more torque than the second place finisher. In the third test, I torqued all the adjustment screws to 180 inch-pounds to see how well they could gain a grip on a high-carbon steel socket extension. The locking pliers then attempted to hold back the socket extension as the impact driver hammered away. Most of the locking pliers lost grip at less than 170 inch-pounds, but the Malco Eagle Grips once again came out on top at 206 inch-pounds. The teeth on the Eagle Grips held up very well with the best possible rating of 1. In the final test, the adjustment screw was tightened on all the pliers until they broke. Half the brands broke at under 300 inch-pounds of torque. Once again, the Eagle Grips came out on top at a very impressive 593 inch-pounds. While the Eagle Grips are more expensive at around $45, they proved to be very capable and well worth the price. A high-quality metal burr set is worth its weight in gold, and the Cle-Line burrs earned a spot in the top 10. To compare the burrs, I first put together a tester that uses a rope and pulley system. I used 5 pounds of pulling force for each of the burrs. And the Cle-Line burr ripped through the grade 8 bolt like a hot knife through butter, making the fastest cut out of 9 brands in only 9.8 seconds. The burr held up really well with only a very small amount of wear and tear. I used a drill press for the second test. I attached a wheel with the rope to the lever arms on the drill press to ensure the same amount of downward pressure was applied for each burr. I then attached 3.5 pounds of weight to the wheel. The SF5 burr is angled and has a little bit different design than the SA5, which was used in the first test. And once again, the Cle-Line performed very well, creating a notch in the 5/16 inch mild steel in only 10.8 seconds. The Cle-Line held up very well and finished in 3rd place overall in this test. I then tested the burrs cutting through an Allen key, which is made of some very hard tool steel. And the Cle-Line once again made very easy work of the very hard tool steel, making the cut in 27.1 seconds. And the teeth on the Cle-Line held up very well. SE5 burrs are great for milling and contouring, and it really helps if the tip of the burr is properly designed for removing material. To test tooth geometry, sharpness, and chip removal, I used some AR400, which is some really hard steel. With 10 pounds of weight on the rope and the drill press wheel, the leverage advantage of the drill press applied about 70 pounds of downward force on the burrs. And several of the burrs barely left a mark in the very hard steel, but the Cle-Line once again performed very well at 8.25 millimeters, which was enough to win this event. After testing 3 styles of burrs cutting from 3 different positions, the Cle-Line came out on top with the best overall finish. I like to say that paint protection is cheap and paint jobs are expensive. And the least expensive product tested, the Hybrid Solutions, did the best job out of 8 brands at protecting a car's paint finish. To test the products, I first washed the car using a powerful detergent that's designed to remove car wax and sealant. I then used a clay bar to remove contaminants such as brake dust from the paint. I went ahead and washed the car one more time to remove any traces of clay. Then I used an iron remover to get rid of the metal contaminants below the surface of the paint that the clay bar couldn't reach. So the paint was completely unprotected and ready to give every product a fair competition. I then taped off 8 sections for testing each of the products. While the paint appears to be very smooth and shiny without a protective coating or sealant, the paint surface is actually full of scratches and very rough. Using a sponge with 5 pounds of weight on top of the sponge and with the front hood level, it took 4.06 pounds to drag the sponge across the paint. I applied each of the products according to the manufacturer's instructions. I then allowed 2 days before testing the products just to make sure that all the products were fully cured. And the Hybrid Solutions did an amazing job with water beating up better than all the other brands. To challenge each of the coatings, then I applied a powerful strip wash which is designed to remove car wax. Several of the coatings were really hurt by the strip wash and the water just didn't beat up very well. On the other hand, the Hybrid Solution seemed unfazed and the water continued to beat up nicely. I then applied the iron remover to all the test areas and allowed 30 seconds for the product to do its job. Once again, the hybrid solutions continue to beat up very nicely while some of the other brands were really struggling. To really challenge the products, I applied some tire and wheel cleaner, which is some really powerful stuff. Even after applying the wheel and tire cleaner, the hybrid solutions is still beating more than it's sheeting. Some of the other brands are pretty much used up at this point in the test. To really challenge these coatings, I used a powerful industrial degreaser. And the hybrid solutions was the clear winner at this point in the test, with water still beating. After torture testing all the products, I once again tested the slickness of each area of the front hood. And the hybrid solutions once again came out on top, showing that you don't always have to pay a lot to get a lot. At a price of around $70, the Lansky Sharpener is a very affordable sharpening system compared to some of the other brands that cost up to $1,100 for the Wicked Edge system. What's also very nice is that it's very compact and doesn't take up too much space. Some of the other brands are just a lot bigger and heavier. To test the sharpness of the knives, I bought a knife sharpness tester. I also bought brand new high carbon stainless steel chef's knives for the testing. The knife sharpness tester came with the sharpness chart. The brand new chef's knives happened to be very sharp. In fact, they were as sharp as a utility knife with a sharpness rating of 135. So the knives needed to be dulled before testing the sharpener, so I built a test rig to dull the knives equally. All the knives had the same amount of weight on top of them, and they made 5 back and forth passes over the aluminum pipe. A look at the dulled knife blade under the microscope shows a really bad dulled edge. I once again tested the sharpness of the dulled knives, and they were almost as dull as a butter knife at 1,160. Trying to set up and use some of the knife sharpeners is pretty complicated. Some of the brands even have some very long instructional videos on how to use their systems, but the Lansky is extremely quick and easy to set up and use. After sharpening, the knife edge looks amazing. What's more impressive is that the Lansky Sharpener actually sharpened the knife edge to 95, which is sharper than the new knife. It almost performed as well as our Wicked Edge system, which did slightly better at 85. Knives are oftentimes used on cutting boards, which can quickly dull a knife edge. To test the blade edge durability, all the sharpened knives made 30 back and forth passes over a piece of wood. After they made the passes, I once again tested the sharpness of the knives. The Lansky started out at 95 and then did a great job of maintaining a sharp edge at 135, outperforming several more expensive brands. Even after 30 passes, it's just as sharp as the new chef's knives before the testing began. So for around $70, the Lansky is a great sharpening system that can allow just about anyone to form a sharp and durable knife edge. The rocket socket rounded nut and bolt extractor was the next product to make the list. There's nothing like a rounded nut or bolt to delay finishing a project, but fortunately the rocket socket rounded nut and bolt extractor did a terrific job. Not only did it perform well, but it also cost less than some of the more expensive competition. The reverse spiral flutes on the rocket socket did a great job gripping and removing the completely rounded bolt. It's also designed to be used with impact tools. In the second test, the bolts that I used for testing the extractors were completely seized. I sprayed penetrating fluid on the bolt just to make things more challenging. The point of this test was to see if the extractor is actually stronger than the bolt. The rocket socket did a terrific job outlasting the bolt and didn't show any visible wear. Unfortunately, not all the extractors survived this test. Since this test, I've been doing a much better job at using safety glasses. Cerakote Trim Coat is designed to restore black plastic trim, and it easily earned a spot in the top 10. Unfortunately, black plastic trim can begin looking dull and faded even when a vehicle is practically new. All the plastic trim restoration products were used on a 2003 vehicle with very faded plastic trim. I first used bug and tar remover to remove as much hidden grime as possible. I then used a strip wash to remove any bug and tar remover residue as well as other dirt. Finally, I used a pressure washer to clean up the trim as much as possible. After cleaning up the trim, it's very faded and porous and will definitely soak up a lot of dirt and dust once it's exposed to the elements. I then applied 2 coats of each product on the vehicle. The vehicle was left outside in the direct sunlight for 5 days without any rain. After 5 days of intense sunlight and UV exposure, most of the products looked just a little bit better than the unprotected plastic. On the other hand, the Cerakote still looks as good as new after 5 days. To see if the products attract or even repel dust and dirt, I drove the test vehicle down a gravel road while following another vehicle. I also used a leaf blower to really stir up the dust. And some of the products just did not do a very good job of repelling dust, while others seemed to attract it. The hard smooth Cerakote coating did by far the best job at preventing dust accumulation. After rinsing off the dust, I compared the hydrophobic qualities of all the products. Several of the products actually performed very well in this test, including Cerakote. I then used a powerful strip wash detergent to test the durability of the products. And the Cerakote Trim Coat held up really well after exposure to strip wash. I then used bug and tar remover on the plastic trim, and then once again used a powerful strip wash to remove the bug and tar remover residue. And the bug and tar remover really hurt the performance of most of the products, as the water was sheeting more than it was beating. However, Cerakote continued to perform very well with the water beating. It's pretty common for degreasers to be used under the hood of a car, and they often come in contact with plastic parts. So after using a powerful degreaser on the test areas, many of the products were pretty much used up, but the Cerakote still looked unharmed. In the final test, I first sanded some jars and then applied each product to the sanded areas. Using a UV meter, I measured the baseline and then tested the area treated with the products. While all the products provide some UV protection, the Cerakote once again came out on top. If you want the best and you don't mind spending a lot of money, the Snap-on torque wrench is a great USA-made tool. To test the torque wrenches, I bought this Proto torque wrench tester. It's the same unit that many calibration shops use since it provides accuracy to 1/10 of a foot-pound. The tester is set up the first peak mode, so the tester will measure and remember the exact amount of torque when you hear and feel the click. When it comes to torque wrenches, both accuracy and consistency is very important. In the first test at 50 foot-pounds, the Snap-on was the most consistent of all the brands with a standard deviation of only 0.34 foot-pounds. I also took 6 measurements for each brand at 100, 150, 200, and 250 foot-pounds. After a total of 30 measurements for each brand, only the Icon, SK Tools, and the Snap-on completed all 30 measurements within the plus or minus 4% torque tolerance range. For precision work such as torquing down a cylinder head, having the exact same amount of clamp load or downward pressure is extremely important. The Snap-on came in on top with a standard deviation of 0.51 foot-pounds. I also tested the torque wrenches in the counterclockwise direction. After testing the torque wrenches at 250, 150, and then 50 foot-pounds for a total of 18 measurements each, the Snap-on, DeWalt, and Proto were the only 3 brands that didn't have any measurements that fell outside the plus or minus 6% torque tolerance range. Of those 3 brands, the Snap-on came the closest to averaging 150 foot-pounds at 151.17. To test the durability of the torque wrenches, I cycled the torque wrenches 1,000 more times and tested them again for accuracy. Once again, the Snap-on stayed within the 4% range of accuracy on all the tests. The swing arc of a ratchet can make a huge difference. To provide realistic swing arc calculations, I measured the swing arc with a socket attached to a fastener. And the Snap-on came out on top at 15.6 degrees. While the Snap-on is very expensive, it came out on top and proved to be a very high-quality USA-made tool. Adjustable wrenches have a bad reputation for rounding off nuts and bolts, but a vintage USA-made Craftsman outperformed an imported Craftsman along with 13 other brands. I first measured the lower jaw side to side and up and down travel. I then measured how much each wrench backed off when they experienced vibration from a compact impact wrench for a fraction of a second. And most of the budget imported wrenches really struggled in this test with the excess jaw movement sending the worm gear spinning. So after testing all the adjustable wrenches, the vintage USA-made Craftsman finished in 3rd place, but the vintage Craftsman was just getting warmed up for the second test. In the second test, I measured the maximum amount of torque each wrench could handle before it rounded off the nut. I moved the handle while tightening the worm gear just to remove all the slack between the wrench and the bolt. I used the torque wrench and a breaker bar until each wrench lost grip. And the USA-made Craftsman worm gear and jaws are built like a tank and refuse to flex or buckle under pressure. And the camera just barely caught the torque reading before the half-inch grade 8 bolt finally snapped at 184.4 foot-pounds. Very impressive. I put together this next tester to measure the quality and performance of the wrenches under load. The steel plate across the top is made of AR 500 to prevent the tester from bending or breaking. With around 200 pounds of pressure on the end of the handle, the size of the gap on the jaws for most of the wrenches was pretty large. Once again, the build quality of the vintage USA Craftsman stood out as it has the smallest gap at only 0.55 millimeters. And the vintage Craftsman definitely earned a spot in the top 10 list, and I believe the old timers that say they don't make tools like they used to are definitely right. Having a good set of lineman pliers in the shop is a great resource, and the Channel Lock brand made the top 10 list. I tested the gripping strength of the pliers in the first test using this tester I put together. After I placed the socket extension inside the jaws of the pliers, I adjusted the handle clamp brackets to right at 2 inches. At 2 inches is very close to 100 pounds of squeezing force on the handles. And the channel locks performed very well in the first test at 9 inch-pounds. In the next test, the lineman pliers were placed in the holder and compared for performance cutting through a 14-gauge insulated copper wire. And the channel lock brand came out on top in this test, cutting through the wire at only 25 pounds. I repeated the same test, this time cutting through a 16-penny nail. Once again, the channel locks beat the competition at only 66 pounds. Compared to nails, screws are made of a much harder steel and they're very difficult to cut. However, once again, the channel locks made it look way too easy at only 104 pounds, coming out on top in this event. The cutting knives in the channel locks also held up very well. At under $30 and a great performance, the channel locks definitely deserves to be in the top 10 list. And the final USA-made product to make the list is the Benchmade folding knife at a price of around $170. And right out of the box, the Benchmade is extremely sharp with a sharpness score of 155, the sharpest of all the knives tested. I then tested the amount of pressure it takes to unlock the knife blade. And the Benchmade is very easy on the fingers at only 356 grams of pressure and once again came out on top. The Benchmade also proved to have a very smooth opening blade requiring 0 grams of pressure and finished in a two-way tie for first place with the Kaiser. Knife blades are made of different types of steel and some knife blades just don't hold an edge very well. To test blade edge durability, I placed the knives inside of a holder. I then placed 5 pounds of weight on top of the knives and made 100 back and forth passes across a bamboo cutting board. And the Benchmade only gave up 10 points, 165. After 100 passes across the cutting board, the Benchmade finished in second place. I then sharpened all the knives using a 17-degree angle. After sharpening all the blades, I tested them one more time just to make sure that they were sharpened to nearly the same sharpness level. I then ran the knife blades across the bamboo cutting board 100 more times to see which knife blade maintained the best edge. And the Benchmade uses a very high quality knife blade steel, losing only 10 sharpness points. And the Benchmade tied for second place with a very impressive sharpness of 120. In the final test, I dropped the knives on the knife point, and the Benchmade survived the impact and still looks as good as new. While the Benchmade is expensive at around $170, it's a very well-made knife that's designed to stay sharp and is very durable. I really had a lot of fun putting together this video on the top 10 products. With that being said, I don't have any issue with buying an imported product. My biggest issue is that USA brands are importing their products from overseas or having them made overseas in order to maximize corporate profits. I don't know what your thoughts are, but I'd be willing to spend a little bit more for a Milwaukee or a DeWalt tool made in the USA, since those are USA brands. All the videos in this channel, including this one, are viewer suggested. So if you have a video idea, I hope you'll take time to leave a comment. Thanks so much for watching. Please take care, and I look forward to next time.